May 5, 1945. The world teetered on the edge of a new era. In the heart of Austria, as the battered remains of Nazi Germany surrendered city by city, a chilling anomaly cast its shadow in the Tolian Alps. Atop a lonely hill stood an ancient fortress, Castle Itra, silent witness to centuries of conflict. But on this day, the castle would become the stage for the most bizarre and suspenseful encounter of World War II. If you'd peered through binoculars at this stone beast, you'd have questioned your sanity. American soldiers, exhausted, grim-faced, manned the walls, firing their weapons into the misty forests. But, shockingly, right beside them, shoulder to shoulder, were German soldiers, not as prisoners, not as enemies, but as armed allies. They wore the grey of the Wehrmacht, yet their guns blazed at other Germans. The dreaded Waffen-SS. The man at the center of this surreal alliance was a U.S. tank commander, with the swagger of a movie hero. At his side, a German major whose only wish was to survive and return home. Together, they faced a fanatical horde. The Waffen-SS, elite Nazi troops, bent on slaughtering everyone inside the fortress. Inside, the stakes were higher than any battlefield could offer. The prisoners they defended weren't ordinary men. They were the most valuable captives of the war. Former French prime ministers, generals, and even a tennis legend. The Nazis had kept them here, in a gilded cage, as living bargaining chips. By now, Adolf Hitler was dead, and the Third Reich collapsed in chaos. Yet in these mountains, the SS had not surrendered. They prowled the woods, hungry for violence, determined that no prisoners should survive. The stage was set for a battle that sounds like fiction, but is chillingly real. The only known moment in history when American and German forces joined as brothers in arms. The castle's ancient stones would soon echo with gunfire, betrayal, and desperate acts of courage. To understand why, we need to step inside this fortress of secrets, where the line between friend and enemy had all but vanished. Castle Itra was no ordinary prison. Its stone halls, once echoing with the laughter of nobility, now held the uneasy silence of high-stakes captivity. Inside, the so-called honor prisoners paced restlessly. Former French Prime Ministers Édouard Daladier and Paul Reynaud, General Maxime Weygand, and the celebrated tennis star Jean Barretra. They were men who had once commanded armies and governed nations. But here, their power had evaporated, replaced by suspicion, old rivalries, and a growing sense of dread. These men were not friends. Years of political bickering and mutual distrust simmered beneath the surface, even as the SS guards stalked the corridors, their nerves fraying with every distant explosion. The war outside was ending, but within these ancient walls, a new nightmare was about to begin. Sebastian Wimmer, the SS commander overseeing the castle, faced an impossible choice. He was trapped between two deadly forces, the advancing Americans, relentless and eager for Nazi prisoners, and the brutal SS divisions, roaming the forests nearby, men who would kill him as a traitor for surrendering. Wimmer knew his orders from Himmler. No prisoner leaves alive. As the American lines drew closer, he felt the vice tightening. In a moment of panic, he abandoned his post, fleeing into the darkness with his men. The castle's guards melted away, leaving the VIP prisoners stunned and entirely alone. But freedom was an illusion. Outside the castle, the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division tightened its grip. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were fanatics, executing anyone who dared to surrender or flee. The French prisoners, desperate, armed themselves with whatever weapons the SS had left behind. But they were old, untrained, and terrified. They needed a miracle. That miracle arrived in the form of a Czech Kuka, humble servant, turned unlikely hero. Braving the deadly woods, he slipped past SS patrols and pedaled a battered bicycle to the nearby town of WWII. Seeking help from an unexpected quarter, Major Joseph Engel, a decorated Wehrmacht officer, was no Nazi. Secretly, he'd aided the Austrian resistance, risking everything for a country not his own. Facing destruction at the hands of the SS, he saw a chance for redemption. When the cook delivered his desperate plea, French VIPs trapped, the SS closing in, Gangel made a decision that would change history. He grabbed a white flag, leaped into his jeep, and drove toward the American lines, not as an enemy, but as a desperate ally in search of hope. Major Joseph Gangel drove through the war-torn Austrian landscape, white flag fluttering above his battered jeep, a symbol of surrender, or perhaps of something far more desperate. He wasn't seeking an enemy to fight, but an ally to trust. Every mile was a gamble with death. SS patrols prowled the roads, and a single misstep meant execution as a traitor. But Gangel's mission was clear: save the French VIPs trapped in Castle Itter, or die trying. He reached the outskirts of Kufstein, where the 12th U.S. Armored Division was paused, engines idling, men wary. At their head was Captain John Jack Lee, brash, cigar-chomping, every inch the Hollywood tank commander. When Gangel approached with his hands up, Lee's men tensed, ready for a trick. But Gangel saluted, his plea urgent and sincere. French leaders were facing slaughter by the SS. They needed a rescue, and, astonishingly, a German major was asking to join the Americans to save them. Lee could have dismissed it as a trap, but some instinct told him this was real. He radioed headquarters. He was taking a rescue mission to Castle Itter, and he was bringing a German officer with him. His superiors thought he was insane, but gave the green light. Lee assembled a ragtag force to Sherman tanks, 7 American infantrymen, and Gangel's truckload of soldiers, Germans, who had turned against their own countrymen. It was an alliance born of necessity and shadowed by suspicion, driving straight into territory crawling with the SS. The convoy rumbled up the winding mountain road, every twist a potential ambush. SS roadblocks appeared like ghosts from the mist, machine guns barked, grenades burst. Lee's tank, the besotted Jenny, blasted a path through, while Gangel's men fired their Mauser rifles at their former comrades. It was chaos, confusion, and courage fused into one. At last, the battered convoy reached the castle gates. The French prisoners, expecting a large American force, blinked in disbelief at the sight. 1 tank, a handful of GIs, and a squad of German soldiers. "Where is the rest of the army?" they demanded. Captain Lee just grinned. "I am it." He took command with brisk authority, ordering prime ministers, like privates, positioning the tank to cover the main gate, placing Americans and Germans side by side on the ramparts. For the first time in years, cigarettes and food were shared between men who had been mortal enemies. But as dawn crept over the Alps, a chilling certainty settled over them all. The SS was coming, and by day's end, they might all die together. Dawn broke with a chilling silence over Castle Itter, but it was shattered by the thunder of gunfire. The SS had arrived, 150 fanatical soldiers, their insignias glinting with menace, anti-tank guns and mortars at the ready. They were here for blood and vengeance, their fury aimed not only at the Americans, but at Major Gangel's men, traitors in their eyes, the worst kind of enemy. Bullets raked the ancient stone walls. The defenders returned fire with dwindling ammunition, determination etched into their faces. Inside, the French VIPs refused to cower. Daladier and Renaud, once statesmen, now fought for their lives, rifles clutched in shaky hands, side by side with American GIs and German defectors. Even Jean Beretre, famed as a tennis star, took up arms. But the SS had a secret weapon, an 88mm anti-tank gun. They aimed, fired, and the besotten Jenny, Lee's beloved Sherman tank, exploded in a ball of fire. The defenders' only heavy weapon was lost. Now it was rifles and courage against a brutal, advancing army. Captain Lee moved between positions, rallying his men with calm resolve. "They have to come through the gate. We'll stack them like cordwood if we must," he told them, lighting one last cigar as a symbol of defiance. The SS pressed closer, their assault relentless. Ammunition ran low, hope faltered. Then, tragedy struck. Major Gangle, directing fire from the battlements, saw Paul Reynaud exposed in the open. He dashed to pull him to safety, just as a sniper's bullet found its mark. Gangle fell, the lone defender, to die in the siege. A German officer sacrificing his life for a French politician and the dream of redemption. As the defenders prepared for a last stand, a desperate plan emerged. With the radio destroyed, someone needed to break out to summon help before the castle was overrun. Jean Beretre volunteered. "I am fast. I will go," he insisted. Vaulting over the wall, he sprinted through open ground as bullets churned the earth around him, vanishing into the woods, with the fate of the fortress on his shoulders. Inside, time slowed. Bayonets were fixed. Magazines checked mostly empty. The SS were at the gate, explosives ready. Suddenly, engines roared in the distance. Relief had come. The 142nd U.S. Infantry Regiment, tanks and soldiers thundering into battle. The SS, caught off guard, fled into the forest. The siege was broken, smoke-blackened, exhausted. Captain Lee greeted his rescuers with a wry smile. "What took you so long?" he quipped. The French VIPs were safe. The war, days later, was finally over. Major Gangle was buried as a hero in Austria. A street named in his honor. Captain Lee quietly returned to civilian life. His courage spoken of by others, rarely himself. The battle for Castle Itter, where enemies became brothers, remains the only time Americans and Germans fought together as allies. In the chaos of history's darkest hours, humanity flickered defiantly, proving that even amidst madness, men could choose honor over hatred.